Hello, world. You are listening to Feel Good, the podcast. I'm your host, Malika Lee, and today we are talking about the fun, the unmistakable, the enlivening shame. Well, I'm sure you could hear a little bit of sarcasm in my voice there. Today, to have this wonderful conversation with me is Joel Grow, who has a PhD. He is a clinical psychologist at the Seattle Mindfulness Center. And he's also a faculty at the University of Washington. And as an aside, I think talking about shame really is one of his areas of passion, I think. So welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really good to be here. It is something I'm very excited about. It's a little bit odd to say excited about something like shame, but interested in, certainly. Yeah, it's a lovely discussion. So thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. So tell me, just out of curiosity, because a lot of people don't respond to shame in that same way, what is it for you? What energizes you about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's just having gone through, a number of years of my life, kind of unaware how much I had it kind of operating at a low level and I didn't know it, and just feeling unhappy at different parts of my life, and then through some different practices starting to notice, wow, maybe there's some shame happening here in myself. And the more I explored it, of course there was a challenge doing that, but the more I explored it, the more I realized how much I'd been avoiding it. And the more I got closer to it, the more it actually became workable. It went from this thing that felt really big and scary and I don't want to talk about it, to being like, all right, this is something I can at least work with. And then it actually helped me connect with other people, because if you can find ways to have a conversation about it, which is why I'm so excited you're doing this, then it makes it more normal for other people to also share their stories, right? And to take some risks, feel a little bit vulnerable, and share a little bit. And so once two or multiple people can do that, it can really, it just feels good to connect in that way. So.
Yes, no pun intended, or pun intended, right. Feels good.
Right.
Well, and I'm sure some of my listeners, because like I said before, shame is not an oftenly spoken about topic, and to have a man here, don't worry, ladies, stay tuned. I will ask Joel some questions to support you, maybe in a relationship and other,
right. Whether men all over asking about shame,
and wanting to talk about it, right? And then you said the V word, vulnerability. Oh my goodness. Gosh, okay, so I'm so excited.
We've opened up a big box here. Yeah.
We have. So let's take it brick by brick.
All right.
So do you mind, what is shame?
Yes, great question. So there is a spectrum, and what I mean by that is that shame can look more like embarrassment, or it can go all the way out to just a really strong feeling of shame. But the idea with it is, it's the sense that there's something about me that is unworthy. It's not good. Mm-hmm. There's something about me that I do not want people to see. I don't want them to know about it, and I want to cover it up. In fact, that's where the root of the word actually means to cover. Mm-hmm. So it's really this feeling that somehow I'm defective. There's just something kind of fundamentally wrong with me as a person. Not that I've done some bad things, but there's more about me.
That I'm
global.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So what? And you said global. So are there some common beliefs around shame that people all around the world have? And if so, what are they? What are those? Right. One word sentences or judgments that we share?
Yes, these sort of, if you sort of boil it down, and they have done research around the world looking at as many cultures as they could, and they do find evidence of shame across all these different cultures. You can show pictures of people in different emotional states, mm-hmm. There's happy, there's sad, and as far as I know, all cultures have been able to identify, that one's shame, or they have some version of it.
Right.
And so that core sentence or that core statement you said, it's usually something like, I'm unlovable, I'm defective, I'm flawed, I'm going to be alone forever. So it's these really harsh, self-critical statements mm-hmm. That are about us. And they make us just feel really isolated. At least they make me feel Like when I'm feeling it, I feel like it's just me. I can look around and feel like everybody else has got it together.
Yeah.
And there's something about me that I don't want them to see.
I think one of mine is like, I don't belong.
I don't belong. Yeah.
Is another one. And to what you're saying, it's an interesting thing because it seems like shame is all around connection,
Right.
and whether we're worthy of connection and love or not.
Exactly. Yeah.
And being a tribal people, or tribal species,
Mm-hmm.
We kind of get away from being animals, which we are, Homo sapiens.
Mm-hmm.
But that could mean life or death if we don't think that we belong. Like taking it to a core survival Maslow hierarchy, right?
Yeah, we're not talking about do I have the right iPod. We're talking about, I'm making a joke, but it's serious, right? Like you said, we're very wired to connect with each other. It's helped us survive in these all different types of environment out there in the world, right? It's incredible what humans have done, but we've done it, like you said, through bonding together as people, helping each other out, moving through the world. But this shame kind of evolved with us as a way to kind of keep us in the tribe, so to speak, right? If you start doing behavior that's outside the tribe, there, it's like, hey man, you're a person, you might get us all killed here, so let's stop doing that. So that's where it kind of came from, right? Is to keep us together and use our power of connection. Mm-hmm. But when we experience shame, right, it's we feel disconnected, we feel isolated. So.
And it can feel really scary.
And scary, for sure. Yeah, for me it does, yeah.
Yeah, me too. And that's really interesting when you're saying about the belonging, because there's a interesting push and pull in the sense of the belonging is really a form of assimilation, right? We have these kind of standards or what we think are norms. In preparing for this conversation, for example, I realized one of the areas I had shame early in my adult career was I got this job, it was in my major. It was like everybody was so proud of me. I was making more money than I ever made, and I was so deeply unhappy. Mm-hmm. And I had never associated it with shame until this conversation, but it was like, is something wrong with me? Why am I not happy?
Right.
Why am I not grateful? Or am I ungrateful because I feel so unsatisfied or dissatisfied with the situation, and everybody else is saying that I should be feeling a totally different way.
And listen to I love this example. Thank you for sharing. Of the statements that you brought up are, is there something wrong with me? Mm-hmm. Right? And it's not, did I do a bad thing, which would be guilt.
Right.
It's more about this idea, wow, there must be something wrong with me. And I think you're saying it can get framed in a cultural context, like you should be, right? People give you that message. You should be feeling better.
Yes.
And we all experience that. I can relate to that. Yeah, you should feel this way. You should feel that way. But inside we think, I don't feel that way.
Right.
Well, wait a minute. That must mean I'm bad or I'm flawed or something's wrong here.
Exactly. Yeah. So you mentioned guilt. Is there a difference between shame and guilt?
And I did it myself, right? It's such an easy thing to mix. We all do it. I do it. We'll say guilt, we mean shame. We say shame, we mean guilt. So yes, there's sort of a scientific, separation and a practical, like a lived experience difference. So guilt, and I want to honor, Brene Brown has done, she's a researcher. She's done a lot of great work on this. A lot of people have seen her TED Talks, and she does a great job of explaining, I think, very succinctly that guilt is I did something bad. Mm-hmm. Totally appropriate. Maybe we did something bad or it went against our values and we feel it. Okay, I did it bad. I can go fix it. Shame is I am bad. There's something wrong with me. Mm-hmm. It's not about specific behavior. It's me. I'm flawed. I don't want anyone to see this about me. So I sometimes kind of half joke, but I'm serious in my classes where I say, if I could help you and me and all of us move from shame to guilt, that's actually a good thing. And people often look at me a little funny, like, why would I want to feel more guilt? But guilt is very workable. Guilt is like, okay, I can see it, right? I did this, I did that. Those weren't the way I wanted to, but I can make some moves here to fix it. I can connect with the person. I can, do whatever it is. And the science shows that. They say if people who feel shame, often that ends up in things like addiction and depression and kind of really negative outcomes. But if someone feels guilt rather than shame, it's actually quite the opposite. They actually are much more kind of psychologically healthy because it gives us that motivation to say, all right, yeah, didn't do it the way I wanted, but it's all right. I got this. I'm gonna get back up. I'm gonna try again. So guilt is actually I don't want to make one better than the other,
Right.
but it's workable. Right.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I really hear you with that, and that's fascinating because most times people be like, we don't want more guilt. Right, but that's not, so guilt sounds like progress in this conversation.
There you go. Well said, yes. Moving you from shame to guilt. So,
right,
yeah.
right. So there are certain things that, that you brought up that were so interesting around the tribe and belonging and connection. And there's some ways, I think, since it sounds like we all experience shame all around the world, that can be used against us. So in some preparation for our time together, there looks like there's very divisive ways of which men get shame around particular topics versus women.
Right.
So can you speak a little bit more about like the difference with shame amongst genders?
Yeah, it's a great topic. And of course, I want to just state really quickly that not all women feel a certain way. Not all men feel a certain way.
Of course.
Just want to make sure that's clear. But yeah, as a broad statement, women tend to have that sense of you got to do it all. You got to do it with a smile on your face, and you got to be modest and ideally be thin. And I mean, there's all these messages, right? And sort of now it's be a good mom, be a good career person, kind of have it all together. And for men, it tends to be to basically not be weak, to be strong, and not to show that weakness. It's kind of like rooted in that. And again, it's of course it's nuanced, and people can feel both of those things. But when we look at it sort of overall, those are the messages that have been permeated through our culture around shame.
So one of the things that was in Daring Greatly is a book I read by Brene Brown.
Yes.
She talks about that. And the level of perfection was one thing you didn't say or in the word for women. And that word alone like ups the ante.
Yes.
Of
perfection. Right?
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing above that. That's it. You got to hit perfection.
Every time. In all areas.
Sorry, I sort of stepped on you there.
But it's a conversation. I didn't feel stepped on, and it's true. So
can I use that as a micro example? See, I noticed in myself there. This might be helpful for people if they feel like they've done something. I didn't feel guilt or shame there about what I said, but I felt a little bit of something. So I reached out and took a little risk and decided to offer you a little bit of an apology around that. So those are little examples of things that can be helpful, because people usually ask me, well, what do I do with this? So
I like that.
I was just throwing that out there. I noticed myself in the moment wanting to pause. I was aware of kind of maybe talking about a woman's experience, and I'm not a woman. I was aware of that.
You want to jump in.
Let me just not step on you there. I'm sorry. So.
Well, thank you for honoring that and speaking to it, even though that wasn't my experience.
See,
yeah.
There we go.
There we go. And it clears it a fresh slate.
Exactly.
Because you know what happens, I found in conversation, is that if I've done something or had an experience that I don't bring forward, then it's kind of running in the background during the rest of the conversation, and maybe even after that. And so it's a nice way to clean the slate, it seems.
Yes. Right, those little messages they're sticky. They just hold on. So.
Exactly. So I was wondering, what were some examples that you had maybe growing up? Because it sounds like, and from the reading and what we didn't say, is that these we become indoctrinated in these kind of societal norms or rules at a very young age. And so I'm wondering if you've had any specific examples you can offer around gender specifically in shame.
Yeah, I certainly can think of a lot. The one that pops to mind right away it's probably a classic for a lot of people, is the adolescence, puberty time, 5th, 6th, 7th grade. For me, it was going to junior high, which for me was 7th grade. And that sense of the man code, sort of being strong and tough, became literally about gender, because I was going into the guys' locker room to go to PE. And at the time, of course, I wasn't well versed in shame. I didn't have a good sense of what this actually was. I just felt uncomfortable and scared, but I couldn't say that.
Yes.
I mean, because that goes against the code, right?
The bro code.
The bro code, yes. And so I just went in there, and I was vaguely aware of being really scared, but trying not to look like it, and seeing older guys in there. And again, if we think about this definition of shame, right? I wanted to cover up something. I didn't want anyone to see that I probably wasn't as good at sports as they were, or, so I was just very aware of how I was carrying myself, sort of sticking my chest out a little more.
Oh, so you
just those
over
little subtle things that kind of overcompensate. Right. And just really aware of that. And there were stories handed down when we were going to junior high about, oh, there's older guys and you might get beat up, or there might be bullies, so there's all these stories, like you said, that are already there that I'm aware of in the culture. And then here I am in a situation where it could happen, and so there's fear, and it's very powerful.
So what did it feel like, or what were the thoughts that you had being in that situation?
Yeah, so this is where I know now what shame feels like from a kind of a body feeling level pretty well. I don't know if I felt it back then, but I know for now there's definitely a sense of heat, like a sort of the face and ears getting pink, and just that feeling of warmth, but not a good warmth, like kind of like, whoa. Whew. And so I'm sure I had a sense of that back then. And people cope. This is something that it's important, I think, to look at within ourselves, is how do I cope with feeling bad? What do I do when I feel bad? Not to add more shame to ourselves, but to just notice, when I feel worry or shame or doubt, here's what I tend to do. And in that case, back in junior high, I coped in some ways by trying to fake it, right?
Right.
Like, oh yeah, it's good, I'm all good, I'm here. And in some ways I think did some things that might have been helpful. And I got kind of lucky. I had some friends there that were my age, and I think they were probably feeling the same way. We didn't talk about it.
Of course not.
Right? But we did kind of band together, and we, found a way to sort of support each other without actually saying anything, which is often stereotypically a guy way to do things, right?
But effective.
But it's effective in some ways, yeah. But it never really got at the core. Like you said, it can be kind of sticky, that sense of, like, am I good enough? Am I appealing visually if I'm not, strong enough or whatever, like that? All those messages are there, and so those stayed there. But I was able to cope. I was able to move through it, and community is a really helpful way for me, having friends, and we could kind of laugh about it.
And well, you never talked about it, so you laugh about it now.
Oh, thank you. Yes, we laugh. You're right. I see. That's tricky, right? We didn't laugh about the real thing, which would be, we didn't have this conversation, but it would look something like, hey, I feel kind of vulnerable right now, and I feel worried. That's not what we said. We said, joked about something else, whatever, something silly, but we at least were able to laugh together about something, and that kind of broke some of the tension. So.
Right, and brought you back together, a sense of belonging.
Exactly.
So we've talked a great deal about shame itself and how to recognize it in your own personal experiences. And I think we're just going to delve a little bit deeper into how you can recognize it maybe with someone else who may be going through an experience of shame, and how to support yourself and the other person. So, Joel, thank you for sharing that story. I feel it's only right that maybe I share very, very briefly one of my own.
Sure.
Middle school, can I just say middle school is rough.
It's rough.
Junior high for you, middle school. I'll tell you, I wouldn't go back. And I've gone through a lot of different experiences that weren't easy. But all of those times, it's like, if I had to repeat anything, middle school would be last on my list. Joel mentioned the differences that based on gender that we can feel shame around. And beauty and mothering were the two for women that Brene Brown identified in Daring Greatly. And going into 7th grade, I had 8 teeth pulled.
Oh. Wow.
So all my baby teeth had not fallen out. So I had 8 teeth pulled. And not only did I have 8 teeth pulled, I had 8 teeth pulled only from the top.
Oh, no. So you're showing up with your first day.
I'm showing up my first day of 7th grade, basically like a bunny rabbit. I had my front 2 teeth and I had my back molars. So, I mean,
I'm sorry for laughing.
It's okay. I can laugh now. Right. But it's laughable now. It was very tough back then. But what it did for me, and I'm wondering, I'm going to ask you about what the gifts of shame, because everything has, its pros and cons. What I'll say is that, so I went, my adult teeth finally came down, but I was missing some adult teeth and they were all kind of jacked up. And I was very self-conscious for a number of years. I didn't get braces right away. And I remember somewhere now in high school, so I had, all these, and I would cover my mouth when I'd smile, or, I had the closed mouth smile. And my dad told me that I had a nice smile. And I started to experiment with it and not hide when I would laugh or smile like I did before. And so when I finally accepted it within myself, by my senior year, they had the senior polls, and I was voted best smile.
All right. Wow.
Without having my teeth fixed yet. I didn't get braces till I was in college.
Yeah.
And so the valuable lesson that it gave me was, of course I'm affected by appearances, but I don't think that for women like that one is as compelling for me as it seems to be, you know, and of course there's variance, but I'll say that the other one was like recognizing that when I was able to accept myself and see my own beauty, that other people can see it also. And what a valuable gift in this modern age of plastic surgery and being able to nip, tuck, change and modify, and then still underneath that, for some people, still not feel, you know, acceptable.
It's never enough.
Yes.
No matter what you've done, there's always like one more thing. Because I love this example. If we could sort of look underneath, the kernel or the core is that sense of lack, right? Or of deficiency or not good enough. And if that's what's driving, then it doesn't really matter what happens on the surface. Yeah, you can do whatever surgeries and everything else. If that core is feeling that insecurity, then that's going to be the fundamental thing. And so you were able, it sounds like, through partly because of your dad gave you this message, right? And then you took some risk yourself, right? You tried kind of smiling a little bit and kind of playing with it and taking some steps. And then you were able to connect with kind of an inner sense of beauty, right? And then that came out. I love that example because we talk about relation, right? Earlier we talked about how we're tribal. We need to be in relation with other people. That's the kind of animals and people we are.
Yes.
And not all of us are very comfortable being in relation with other people. There's another relationship we haven't mentioned, which is the relationship with ourselves. And that's so important. And I love how you highlighted that. And I resonate with that myself as well. Very similar, like that idea of, I lifted weights. I got better at sports and I did all the right things. And it was fine on the surface. I had friends and did fine. But there was still that underlying, that I wasn't aware of, that underlying just not okay, not good enough. And it wasn't until I started talking to that voice that things really shifted. So that's the relationship with ourselves, right? How do we treat ourselves?
Right.
So let's a great way to work with shame, I've found, or self-doubt or self-judgment, is to, when we notice, right, have some awareness, right? That I love this awareness. Okay, wow, I'm feeling bad right now. Okay, pause. What is it I'm feeling? Oh boy, I'm really beating up on myself right now.
Can I interject something just really, because what I wanted to just offer is that one of the things Brene Brown mentioned about for men is that with shame is anger or shutting down. So I just wanted to offer that because someone may not feel like they're feeling bad. They might feel really angry.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
It's an excellent point. And they talk about this with depression in men versus women, in the way people express. And again, of course, not all men.
Right. And not all women.
Not all women express the other way. But you're right. That's right. Sometimes people may, not only, if we're talking about men, they may feel anger, like you said. And it's not only that they're not aware that there's something under the anger, it's that sometimes the culture supports that. Oh, men are angry. That's just how men are. Oh, he's being assertive, right?
Yes.
And maybe their message is for women, and not to mansplain here, but maybe they were told not to be angry, right? It's not okay to be angry.
And to get discounted sometimes when we are you PMSing?
Yes,
like those
or
type of
being
things.
Emotional,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Emotional. Oh, how dare you have emotions? Right?
Exactly.
So we need men to have, it's not that men don't have emotions. It's that we're just kind of out of touch with them.
Yeah, it's not supported. But you were saying about dealing with ourselves, which is so important. I just wanted to alert people that it may not be feeling bad, it might be feeling angry or some other emotion, and shame still may be the culprit underneath that.
Exactly. I kind of skipped through. I assumed everyone knows how to recognize in themselves, which is a real skill, and it just takes practice.
Okay.
So I'll repeat that. Be kind to ourselves. Take some practice, like you did with your smile, right? Just keep trying. Kind of notice. Oh, what am I feeling right now? What is this? What's happening? And it might be anger. It might be irritability. It might be more of a depressed, sad kind of feeling. But just kind of being willing, right? That takes some willingness with ourself, right? You're taking a little bit of a risk with yourself. What am I feeling? And from there, a great way to work with that I've found is, what would I tell a friend who's going through the same thing I'm feeling right now? So if I notice in myself, I'm not even sure what I'm feeling, Malika. I just feel bad. I'm kind of feeling angry, and I'm just, and it feels bad. I got to get rid of it, and I don't know what to do. First of all, great noticing that that's what you're feeling.
That's the first step.
Good. Yeah, you noticed, right? Okay, that's what's happening. And then maybe it's helpful just to say, all right, what if a friend walked up to me right now and said the exact same thing to me? What would I tell them? Are there some messages I might tell them? Is there a tone of voice I might use with them? And most people, when I ask them that, will say, oh yeah, I would support that person. I would be kind to them. I'd be warm. I'd try to help. But it's interesting when we look at ourselves, often we're pretty self-critical with ourselves, right? I wasn't perfect.
Yes.
I didn't look the way I wanted to look. I didn't, whatever it is, right?
You're right.
So I find it a helpful way to get out of our own kind of isolation to say, well, what would I tell a friend in this case? And then we can kind of connect with kindness and warmth. And then we can say, all right, can I offer that to myself a little bit?
Yes.
So it's easier said than done.
Right. Right. We'll have you come back and we'll talk about how to be your own best friend.
How to be your own best friend.
Yes, and how to do that more. So what are some things, in addition to being aware and being kind to ourselves when we're feeling activated or triggered, what are some other things that have been shown to help? I don't know if eradicate is even possible, but to support a person that's going or having an experience of shame.
Right. Yes. And it's such a, I actually like that you said eradicate, and I do this all the time too, because I get into the trap that it's a problem, that shame is really bad and I need to sort of eradicate it. And I understand that. And there's this paradox that the more we can let go of some of that resistance toward it, and just say, all right, this is what's happening right now. I'm feeling this. If we can, there's this saying, if we can feel it, we can heal it.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah, I like that phrase too. I like these little phrases. So name it to tame it. Okay, so if I can name it, oh, I'm feeling some anger. I'm feeling some self-doubt, feeling some shame. Then I've named it. I can maybe let it be there a little bit. And again, it doesn't have to be diving into the deep end. It doesn't have to be, I need to just feel everything, but just even shifting a little bit, just like, oh, I wonder what this feels like. Just to even bring that question in will lessen some of the impact on it. And then we need to take care of ourselves, right? Because shame tells us, we're bad, we're different, we need to basically hide. We need to say, all right, hold on, is this really true, right? Take a pause, take a breath. Maybe then there's an option that we didn't think about. For some people, that's reaching out to a friend, reaching out to a teacher, a parent, a family member, a religious person, someone like that, and having a, reconnecting in a human way. For other people, it's not. It might be, some sort of self-care, taking a walk, getting a nice cup of tea, something like that. But it starts with that pause and that noticing.
Okay.
Right? And then, okay, what's here? Finding a way to maybe get out of that sense that it's uniquely me. That isolated kind of feeling, like, okay, people feel this. I remember Joel talking that one time on that podcast about this thing, right? Okay, people feel this.
This is normal.
This is normal, right? I'm not a bad person for feeling this. And then that often can give us a little bit of space to figure out what would help me here, right? Is it reaching out to somebody? Maybe it's making amends for something, right? Maybe we do feel more of that guilt thing where it's like, okay, I did kind of do something that I don't feel good about. Okay, maybe now we can do something to make that better in some way. So
okay. There's a lot of meat and breadth and depth to it.
Yeah.
And I know that being vulnerable is one of the things that Brene Brown speaks to as an opportunity to
it's so funny that word
work through
it's so important.
shame.
When you said it, I got this little bit of like the hair on my neck stood up in a good way. It's such a powerful word. Sorry, the vulnerability.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit about in that situation you've noticed that you're upset, and like you're saying about checking in with yourself and all of those things. So what is something vulnerable, or how does that support someone that's experiencing shame?
Yeah, so if it's yourself feeling the shame, is that what you're asking, or is it more about?
Right. So this is like if I'm saying if I, so you walked us through how to, one, be aware of it, and then there's some different things that we can do. So I'm just wondering, how does vulnerability from Brene Brown's research, and how does that play into and support a person with shame?
Right. Great question. So if I'm feeling shame, then what shame is telling me is, Joel, you're bad and you need to hide, essentially, and don't reach out to people. And, basically it's just a bad feeling. And the vulnerable part would be taking a risk to do kind of the opposite of what shame's saying, right? Shame's saying you're uniquely bad and you need to hide. So we pause, we notice, like we said, and then it's what would be a move that would reconnect me in some way. So, and that's where we have to kind of check in with ourselves, because it's not always clear, but perhaps it's saying something to a friend or a loved one or someone else that is a little bit vulnerable, where we kind of share a little bit about what's going on with us. It doesn't necessarily have to be the whole picture, right? It can be just a little bit. Maybe it's almost like a reaching out as a connection with someone. Mm-hmm. Maybe we say something we haven't said before, in a way that's a little bit more vulnerable. Maybe it's just saying, wow, right now I need some support.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's going to look different for different people.
Okay.
But it's noticing the sense that we shouldn't do that,
mm-hmm.
and then being willing to say, I'm going to take the little bit of a risk here and reach out and try it and see where it leads me.
I like it. How bold.
Bold. Yeah.
That takes something right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have just a few moments left, and I'm wondering, because we still, I really, there's such a rich opportunity about shame and about, especially in partnership, like if you are able to recognize when someone else is in shame in the relationship, like, can you just give us, a few things that we can do?
Right. That's a great, because I found the more I notice it in myself, the more I can just, like I said, notice what's happening, pay attention, maybe take these little risks to try to kind of increase my capacity a little bit. Mm-hmm. The more I notice it in other people too. And you can sort of notice when someone else is withdrawing a little bit, or you can kind of see it on their face, that little, maybe they're flushed in the face, like an embarrassment, but a little stronger, or maybe they don't answer the phone, or they're not texting you back or something, and you might just suspect. So again, now we've got vulnerability going the other way, because it's like, okay, how do I reach out to this person in a way that feels supportive, right? And again, how that actually looks might change a little bit depending on who you are, but it's taking a little risk in the relationship on that end. Like, hey, maybe I can
we make it more personal?
Sure.
Because you're married, you have kids.
Yeah.
So, and siblings and parents and relations. Can you give us an example of, and you don't have to tell us who to honor their privacy, but can you give us an example, because you're here not just because you're an expert, but because you have the experience.
Right.
They're willing to talk about it.
How to support someone else in shame. So yes, I have a friend that certainly comes up all the time. But the example that came to mind was a friend of mine who's a guy friend who's been a friend for a long time, who was going through some medical things, and he and I have known each other so long before I started approaching these topics that we kind of still interact the guy way.
Yes.
And we're working on shifting that, but it's very interesting feeling that pull of what it was like when I was younger to interact in a certain way. And so I have to, we both kind of take these baby steps toward being a little more vulnerable with each other. But we were driving, and he was driving, and he was talking, and I all of a sudden in the conversation, there's that moment where I realized there was something kind of vulnerable in me. I just noticed, whoa, I feel weird, and I looked over, and I realized he actually had a little bit of tears on his eyes, and I'd never seen that with this person, and I'd never probably cried in front of him, and I realized he and I had been kind of doing this conversation for the past 5 or 10 minutes that was kind of surface level, and all of a sudden I realized there was something he wanted to say, and it scared me. It's like, oh boy, like, am I going to go there with him, even though I do this in other areas of my life? And this is that vulnerability thing. Right. I actually just said, wow, it looks like you're in a lot of pain. Is there something you want to say? Now, that may not sound like a huge statement, but we had never said that before to each other.
Yeah.
And it was a really powerful moment. All of a sudden, he started crying, and he explained this fear he was having. And it was very moving in a very powerful way that looked different from how it might look with my wife or with other friends or with other therapists, or, so it can look different for different people, and it can look different for you with different people in your life, right? You have to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated him. That was a lesson I learned from approaching this with him. I was like, wow, we've been friends for 30 years, and that was it all of a sudden hit a new level just through that interaction and taking that little bit of a risk on my part and him kind of being willing to show a little bit. So
wow,
it was really cool.
I'm really moved by that story.
Yeah.
Because all we can offer is an invitation.
Right.
You know, a person may not take us up on it, but it was a beautiful moment that you had enough of that groundwork and trust laid that he could share that part of himself. So, gosh, Joel, please, we'll have to have you back.
We just started.
I know.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. For those listening, if anyone is interested in getting a hold of you, how could they find you?
Thank you. joelgrow.com is my website. That's probably the easiest way.
Okay.
Feel free to email or look on there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening to a topic that may not be considered or the opposite of feeling good. This has been Feel Good with Malika Lee. Please be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, and take it one step at a time.
Great advice.
Thank you. And if you're interested in getting a hold of me, please find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at Ms. MS Malika Lee, MALIKALEE. And you can find more content of upcoming shows. How did that feel for you?
It felt fine. There's just so many things to cover. I just worried we didn't
I know. I was
get
just
to
like,
what you wanted, but
I think what we got to is really rich. It's like we just have to turn it over. And that's what I do. Like when I center myself, I just say kind of a prayer within, like, let it just be of service. Let us be instruments.
Right.
And that people will get what they need to get from it.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
And that's good, deep wisdom.
I think that there is so much, especially, I loved when you brought up about the belonging. And I was like, oh my goodness, this could be the foray into a totally, going back into the mass shaming based on, politics and all.
I feel maybe that's why I feel like that's what I want to be done in culture is all that. And we don't have time to get into that. So that's what part of me is like, not today, right.
But
so
we can talk about it next time.
Okay.
I'd love to, especially after I had that epiphany of like, oh, it's this form of control. And I think we all dance between, this is my own, I had like a revelation around this. But, okay, so from a spiritual perspective, which, you may not agree or disagree, but, okay, but from the standpoint of like, what are we all here for? And if we are children of God in theory, and God is love, then really we have the potential to become love.
Yes.
And so my epiphany was how we each have something that we have rejected and have shame about that's unworthy of love. And our journey is about getting to a place of being able to love and accept ourselves, because God already loves us. That's God's nature. That's our nature too. We just kind of lost our way. But it's like that's our personal. If we were to do a macro, everyone's personal journey is like, how do we get to a place of accepting the totality of all that we are?
Exactly. Yes, I use the word integration. Yeah. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. We get cut off parts of ourselves, and we can manifest that. Men, we do it because we can't be sissies. Women, we can't be whatever. Yeah. All the intersections, right? We cut off parts, and how do we bring that together and love all of it? My personal thing is where I talk about that, like the Trojan horse. Like I'm the reason I do this is liberation for me. And I don't mean me personally. I want to support that concept, which is from suffering, from racism, from
I almost feel like we're already still recording. I'm like, should we put our mics back on?
That's where I want to